Hi, this is Alessio. Hope you're well. I recently spoke with the analyst and economist Lyn Alden, and I asked her this very important question.
This is a tough question, I guess, because we've never had Bitcoin during a major recession, because in 2008, the last recession, Bitcoin didn't actually exist at the time. But what is your view about, like, for example, how Bitcoin price may be impacted during a recession? Or indeed, if it turns out, let's say as an example, we have as you say, a disinflationary type of recession, how would Bitcoin price be impacted? What's your view on that?
Well, so we had a recession officially in 2020. It was a brief one. It was an unusual
Okay.
one. And obviously Bitcoin did do briefly terrible. I mean, Bitcoin collapsed, pretty much everything collapsed and then went back up.
Yeah.
If we look at it in terms of, say, economic cycles, so PMI cycles, so rising and falling, periods of economic acceleration and deceleration, which are not necessarily inflations, but can become, they can become recessions, but are not necessarily recessions. Generally, we've had an environment where Bitcoin does better when economic growth is accelerating, and it's generally done poorly when economic growth is decelerating. And so that would corroborate your view that it generally does not do well, at least in the early phases of recession. Another big thing that it's correlated with is global liquidity. So if you look at global money supply, global M2, broad money supply, and then you translate it all back to dollars, because that's kind of the chief funding currency of the world. That's kind of the unit of account of international trade. And so if you translate it all back into dollars, there's two obviously variables that will impact that year-over-year figure. One is how much printing is happening. Basically how much are different currencies expanding their money supply, and then two, how strong is the dollar relative to those currencies? Because when you translate all back into dollars, obviously the strength of the dollar relative to those currencies will matter. And generally speaking, and this is actually a pretty tight correlation, when global money supply measured in dollars is going up pretty rapidly, that's a great environment for Bitcoin. When it's going down, when basically that year-over-year rate is rolling over or even stops growing entirely, that's usually a pretty bad environment for Bitcoin. And in that sense, what Bitcoin is hedging is not price inflation, but monetary inflation, or debasement, we can call it. Basically, it's basically one of the more pure plays on liquidity. And so I think that's probably the key thing to watch, is what's happening with liquidity and what's happening with the rate of change of economic growth. And so I do think that when you have falling liquidity and economic deceleration, yes, you'd expect Bitcoin to do pretty poorly, which is what we've seen over the past, especially the past 6 months. And then when you have a bottoming out of liquidity, monetary easing, and you're kind of in the middle of the recession and maybe turning up, that's when I would expect probably Bitcoin to catch a bottom and do pretty well.
It's very interesting. And guys, please do check out Lyn's newsletter and her premium service. Please go to this. Again, I think it's a brilliant service that she provides. lynalden.com/premium, and you can find out all the details about that and subscribe to her newsletter.